Hello lads, ladies, gents, ladetts, whoever, whatever, welcome back to another video. Typically, I try not to cover games that aren't going to be released within the next 12 months unless they have something playable, which is why today I'm talking about a local Australian indie game called End of Ember. I was not given a copy of this game, but there is a public prototype available for you to play, which will be linked below, along with their Steam page if you so decide to wishlist it, which I hope you do. With that out of the way, what is End of Ember? In a brief summary, it's a love letter to horror, childlike humour, and games like Binding of Isaac. End of Ember itself is an action roguelike that sees you playing as Ember, initially trying to get attention from her parents, only to seemingly end up being killed by her drunk mother while she busts a move. And I will say this with full confidence. Never did I think at any point in my life that that was a sentence I would say. Eventually, Ember is seemingly reborn, or at least awakens in hell, armed with a horror movie staple, a chainsaw. You'll need to find your way through a procedurally generated dungeon, trying to earn money and kill all the enemies that you can. It is important to note that it is not 100% procedurally generated, as much as there are rooms that will spawn next to each other, connected via hallways. But at least in my time with the prototype, I never really got the same room twice within the same dungeon, and the amount of different rooms there are is really damn impressive for how early in development this game is. Continuing on, eventually after you make your way through, you'll find yourself fighting the end of level boss, and upon defeating the clearly disgusting penis monster, the prototype ends. Now obviously when the full game releases, there'll be infinitely more content than just a single level, but this one level gives us one hell of a look at the mechanics and overall presentation of the game. Starting out with the mechanics, the game plays like a twin stick shooter, and it's very much what you would expect of the genre. You have a pretty decent walking speed and a dodge roll to avoid the bullet hell that you find yourself in, all the while being able to shoot a melee with your chainsaw. Yes, I said shoot. Don't worry about it, don't think about it. As well as a bomb, which can be several different types depending on what you find or buy, with it being the last major way to deal damage to enemies. With a focus on constantly moving, it's hard to not find yourself immediately engaged with the gameplay at its core. Thanks to the sheer amount of enemies and projectiles that can be on the screen at any given point, odds are you'll find yourself either feeling like the greatest gamer alive or just end up dead, which will probably happen a lot. I will say though, compared to others in the genre, End of Ember is probably on the easier side, at least for the prototype, but I assume that the game will definitely get a lot harder as you progress. The combat, although on paper, doesn't really deviate too much from what I've described. However, the game's items are where things start to change up. Upon starting a run, you are given a few random items, which helps you set up what your run is going to be like, making every single one feel fresh and new. It made me do dozens of runs, even though the game only has a single level for the time being. From more projectiles, faster bullets, bum bombs, and even the legendary cum shot. Again, never thought I'd be saying that in a video. End of Ember just has so much on offer already, and I can't wait to see more of the wacky ideas that the team come up with. It's not done there though, because if you have the upgrade points before the final boss, you get a chance to add a modifier to Ember, which makes the combat feel completely different yet again. You might get bigger bullets, but at the cost of slower movement speed, double bullets, but less damage, and much more. Again, keeping every single run feeling fresh, new, and exciting. It really helps break up the big problem that I think a lot of roguelikes tend to have these days, and that is the fact that once you find a build that wins, you're pretty much always going to do it. Whereas in End of Ember, from the get-go, it says try to win with this instead. As you explore trying to find the level boss, you'll eventually run into the in-game store. Now, if you've collected enough money, you can buy further upgrades for your weapon, health, and everything else you would expect, allowing you to experiment even more than what you already start out with. What makes the store really fun is the fact that every time you start a run, it's going to have a completely random set of items, so you never know what you're going to get. Also, it's just fun to see the names of some of these items, because like the visuals, there are a ton of Easter eggs and callbacks, but not just for horror movie fans, but even action movie classics along with some pop culture icons. Overall, mechanically, the game is already showing a ton of promise, and what is kind of sad in the best way possible is the fact that it gets a little overshadowed by arguably the biggest selling point of End of Ember, its presentation. Graphically, the game has gone for an incredibly unique style, mixing cute with extreme gore, all the while having wonderful and fluid animation that would be at home in just about any cartoon. Even though the game is clearly horror inspired, there are a ton of bright and vibrant colours throughout, typically on either enemies or at least their attacks, making them stand out from the wonderfully drawn backgrounds, making it easy to follow so you never really feel overwhelmed at any point. As mentioned, there are a ton of Easter eggs for hardcore horror fans, from Alien, Hellraiser, and even my personal favourite horror series of all time, The Evil Dead. There are so many references, it becomes its own game trying to figure out what each room is representing. At least in the prototype, there isn't a ton of music, but it does give us a taste of what to expect for the full release, with that being a much more hard rock and metal driven OST. The opening credit song you hear before starting a run was something I found myself listening to every single time, never opting to skip. Even though you can, I just wanted to hear it again and again. The main track you listen to while going through the dungeon is also pretty good, but I will say it's hard to beat the credit song. I mentioned at the start that End of Ember is a local indie game because it's being made by a small team out of South Australia, which makes me want to cover it even more. But I had to ask what inspired them to make this game in the first place, in which Chad, the production director, let me know. Really, this started as a project of Dan's to clone the Binding of Isaac to see if he could make a game, and it turns out that he could. Well, sort of. He made a banger of a prototype, but he needed a real programmer and someone to handle the business, so that's how we all came together. Roguelikes are really fun and replayable, which is important because indies don't have the resources to create massive realistic worlds, and we're all fans of horror from way back, especially Dan. Check out the horror references right throughout the game. There are definitely some classics in there, in which the part about roguelikes being replayable made me ask if they had any further plans beyond the initial release, which Chad also let me know that they are wanting to do a lot of post-release support, with potential new modes, DLC, and possibly a sequel, though it's still too early to say anything specific since the game is still in the early stages of development. Finally, I did also ask if they had any other projects in the works, and Chad did let me know that Dan, the creative director, does want to make a boomer shooter, hopefully within the same world of End of Ember, but that will depend on the community feedback. Speaking of, the entire team at Bad Plan Studios are super open to feedback and always welcoming of any ideas that you might have, so don't be afraid to try the game yourself and send in some feedback. I don't tend to do it often, if ever, but I would humbly ask that you please share this game with everyone that you think might enjoy it. I know I'm biased because I really want to see the Australian indie scene grow as much as possible, but this is a project I truly believe in, and without a shadow of a doubt believe that the team is onto something special. You don't have to share my video by any means, but please consider sharing the game and wishlisting. So with that, lads, ladies, gents, ladetts, whoever, whatever, it brings us to the end of another video. I hope you enjoyed this little snippet of End of Ember. I know, again, this game is super early in development and there's not really a ton of more information that I can give. However, I do sincerely hope you wishlist the game and try it for yourself. I will be covering this game as it goes through its development cycle, however, I'm not going to cover every single update that comes out, but do understand that I will stream the game fairly regularly, so if you enjoy watching live streams, please join in. If you enjoyed the video, please consider hitting that like button. If you want to go that extra step, hit the subscribe button. And if you want to go that extra mile, you can support me on Ko-fi, Patreon, or YouTube memberships like these lovely people here. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay safe out there. Bye.